How is it going, MPL fans, and welcome to Pokemon of the Week. My name is Wanzi Burnett, and I'm going to be talking you through what Pokemon sets stood out to me in this week's round of matches. Now, the first week's games have all been played, and some of which were incredibly close, but what stood out to me so far was the level of detail and creativity that went into every coach's prep. And to start us off, we have not so creative Mon, but actually did incredibly well because of the moveset that was brought on it. And that is Tapu Bulu for the Austin Tauros, coached by Pokerob. And Tapu Bulu here managed to get 5 kills in its first game. And you'd be thinking, well, that doesn't mean much. It's a Tapu Bulu. It's going to hit like an absolute truck. But 2 of those kills were with special moves. The Tapu Bulu this game was a choice banded Tapu Bulu with special attacks. I believe it had Dazzling Gleam and Hidden Power Fire. Now, the reason why that is so impressive is because it managed to kill a Kommo-o and outspeed a Kommo-o. It was completely, it was tailored completely to outspeed a Kommo-o that doesn't have max investment, which it didn't, so it was able to outspeed and get off 2 Dazzling Gleams before the Kommo-o was able to respond. And the other thing about it was the Hidden Power Fire, which was because the opponent had a Kartana. And if you don't know what Kartana does, it just swords dances and eats things alive. But it has absolutely no special defense, so a choice spec Shuckle could kill it with a Hidden Power Fire. But the Tapu Bulu here managed to predict twice on those Pokemon switching in, managed to predict the Kartana switching in and clicked HP Fire, managed to predict the Kommo-o coming in and clicked Dazzling Gleam. It was then able to outspeed the Kommo-o and hit it with a Dazzling Gleam, which was absolutely fantastic. I thought that was an amazing piece of prep. But apart from that, it was banded, so the predictions had to be absolutely on point, but bringing special moves on a banded Mon was incredibly ballsy from Pokerob, and I've got to give him nothing but credit. I've got to give him so much credit for this, because it still managed to put in work with its Horn Leeches and Woodhammers afterwards, and ended up finishing the match with 5 kills. It was an absolute menace all throughout the game. Absolute menace. You could tell that the opponent really didn't know what to do about it, didn't know what to do, so Tapu Bulu just ended up destroying him. And that was absolutely deserved for a brilliantly thought up Tapu Bulu set. Now, some players like to play hyper offense. Like myself, I'm a hyper offense player, and the Austin Tauroses in the last game brought a banded Bulu, which didn't really have many switch-ins, so it was able to bully the opponent. However, some coaches, like our next coach, like to play a little bit more dirty and a little more stally. Eric, Ashton Akai, and the AS Rowlet brought a Toxapex to their match against Bluesy in the Edinburgh Dragon Knights, and let's be honest, this Toxapex was disgusting. Disgusting. It actually finished the game with 4 kills, and having sat through the entire game, this Toxapex just wasn't ever going to die. It was taking super effective stab hits from a Uxie, it was taking earthquakes from, I can't remember what it was now, but it was taking all kinds of hits. It bullied the Volcanion, which didn't pack Earth Power, which was a little bit of an oversight on Bluesy's part, but it's forgivable. But the thing is, once Garchomp went down, and once Sandslash went down, Toxapex was just not going to die. So Eric played very well in trying to isolate those 2 threats early game. So after that, after they went down, Toxapex was just given absolute free roam. It was recovering, it was switching out, it had a burn the whole time, it didn't have its leftovers after turn 2, but it was still just sitting in, taking hits, toxicking things, trapping things, and just forcing Bluesy into an eventual forfeit, which I can actually understand, because if you're up against something like that that's just unkillable, you really aren't going to want to carry on playing. It's happened to me before. I haven't forfeited, but being in that position, you don't really want to stay in the match, so it's understandable that you forfeit. But Toxapex in the end ended that game with 4 kills because it just refused to die, and even if it had somehow gone down, Eric had a stranglehold on that game and could have just cleaned up with Diggersby anyway. The beauty of stall. Now, while Eric had a very interesting time in that game with his Toxapex picking up the 4 kills, there was another Mon in that game that really caught my eye. Not for the reasons that you'd think. The other Mon from that game that I really enjoyed, and this was a personal favourite of mine this week, simply because I just genuinely enjoy stuff like this, was the Alolan Sandslash that Bluesy brought against him. It was Manual Hail with Icicle Spear in order to... I think it also had Leech Life, I'm not too sure. But it was also just an absolute torment for Eric early game. He just couldn't play around it. He was trying so hard and he was taking so many hits. It got to a point where it was very nearly able to kill the Celesteela with another Icicle Spear. It could have absolutely destroyed him. And I mean absolutely destroyed him if he played it correctly. The only thing that went wrong for Bluesy here was I believe he let it go too early, switching it in quite poorly. But that's just to be expected. I thought it was a very fantastic piece of prep to bring that thing with Manual Hail Icicle Spear, because when you're up against a Dragonite, you want multi-hit moves. You want to be able to have an Icicle Spear to just wreck its life. But the Sandslash was absolutely brilliant, and I really enjoyed seeing that level of creativity. Manual Hail setters, even though it does have the ability that doubles its speed, you don't normally want to have Hail on an Alolan Sandslash. You want it to have the 4 move slot, like 4 moves, either Swords Dance or 4 attacks. But having the Manual Hail itself, it caught Eric off guard early game, and it very, very easily could have resulted in Bluesy picking up a positive result here. Now, while we're talking about Hail, I don't think it would be very fair to carry on without talking about Kyurem B for Megalugia's Bayern Munchlax. He actually wasn't doing too well in this game. He'd messed up his lead, he hadn't managed to get Zoroark disguised as the correct Pokemon, and he didn't have the correct hidden power on it either, because he wanted to have hidden power Ice, which would have been a one-hit KO on Landorus Therian, but unfortunately he had, I believe it would have been something like Hidden Power Dark or Hidden Power Fire or something. Probably Dark because 31 IVs and everything, but that aside, he didn't get off to the greatest of starts. He ended up losing his Decidueye pretty early on, which meant that Landorus Therian became a little bit of a problem. But when Kyurem B came in, it was able to do something quite interesting. Now, I haven't actually seen this done before with a Kyurem B, although I assume it's a pretty common set for it now. Kyurem B was given the Icium Z and Hail. So once Megalugia had been able to, chip down his opponent a little bit, Kyurem B was able to come in, set up the Z Hail, get to +1 speed, tank an Analytic Hydro Pump from a Starmie, and kill everything. Like, this thing was a monster, an absolute monster. It was ridiculous. It was just one-shotting things or two-shotting things, and because he had Hail, he also brought Blizzard, which meant he didn't have to have Ice Beam, and Kyurem B was able to pick up a lovely 4 kills in this game with Fusion Bolt, Blizzard, and Hail. The one thing I think he made a bit of a mistake on, in my opinion, was, well, it's either a mistake or a very, very inspired decision, to be honest, but the one thing I think that was a little bit controversial for me was he decided to set up Hail on the Starmie, which then ran Analytic. It ran Analytic Hydro Pump, and he was pretty sure it was Specs. Instead of setting up the Hail, he should have just gone straight for another Fusion Bolt, because even if Landorus had came in, he would have been able to live any hit at that point, I believe, that the Landorus wanted to do. And even if it didn't, it meant that he could very well have lost his Kyurem B there, because if it had Dazzling Gleam, if the Starmie had Dazzling Gleam, it could have resulted in Kyurem B going down to a super effective hit, which wouldn't have been the greatest thing in the world. But it all worked out in the end. Z Hail working out to get the Kyurem B up to +1 speed, outspeeding his opponent's entire team and picking up a 2-0 win. I thought that was fantastic prep, and I really enjoyed watching this game. It was great from start to finish. Now, another one that caught my attention this week was Greninja for the Grimsby Grimers, coached by Blue Rogue. And the reason it caught my attention was because it managed to pick up 3 kills with the Battle Bond Life Orb set. Battle Bond is the debate of many. People think it should be banned, people think it shouldn't be banned. I personally think it probably should be banned, but I'm a little bit on the fence. If I had to lean to one side, probably be banned, simply because I feel like once it sets up, it is an absolute powerhouse, and it kind of proved itself in this game, because once it managed to get that revenge kill and set up its Battle Bond, it just started to run through his opponent. The reason I haven't put it as like the first thing I wanted to talk about is because they did end up losing that game, because unfortunately Mimikyu missed a play rough on Zygarde 10% form, which resulted in Zygarde being around late game to extreme speed Greninja and take it into Life Orb range. But that regardless, Greninja still managed to put in the finest of work, could have picked up 4 kills and would have carried this game, absolutely carried Blue Rogue through this game. It's a bit of a shame that Mimikyu missed, but it's ended up coming to bite him in the arse, and sometimes that's just what happens. RNG decides things for you, but I'm certainly going to give Greninja a spot on Pokemon of the Week because it was certainly something that just had the potential to destroy his opponent. Very good prep to bring the set he wanted this week. He brought Dark Pulse, Hydro Pump, Water Shuriken and Ice Beam, which really hit everything on the opponent's side for at least neutral damage, and it just really was a good idea. So I'm very happy to have this Pokemon in Pokemon of the Week, and yeah, it was a shame he ended up losing, but hey ho, that's just what happens. And the final Pokemon I've got for you this week is Manaphy, the Scourge of the Sea, for Turbo Blaze and his Phoenix Midnights. Now I really think he needs to start putting his team name in the title of his videos, but it's a thing, I've left a comment on his videos telling him so. But yeah, Manaphy, it wasn't exactly the most creative Manaphy set this week. It was more of a Tail Glow, Surf, Rest, Ice Beam, I think it was the final move, hybrid. It wasn't exactly creative, but the way he played with it certainly made it worth bringing. Sometimes you don't have to be incredibly creative and innovative with your Pokemon sets to make them do work. As was shown here, Manaphy was a constant thorn in his opponent's side. Every time he brought Manaphy in, it was either forcing switches or trying to 1v1 the opposing Tangrowth. I believe his opponent brought an Assault Vest Tangrowth in order to try and deal with Manaphy, but I believe that Turbo Blaze was incredibly clever with what he brought. He brought a slightly bulkier variant that was able to take Leaf Storms from Tangrowth and then heal up on it with Rest, and it couldn't get two-shotted by Giga Drain either. It was a very clever set. It wasn't exactly creative, but it was certainly clever. It did what it needed to do. It ended up only getting 2 kills in the game, but it was always causing pressure. Every time it came in, it forced a switch. It was able to force out a Buzzwole at +1. It was able to do things. It was able to really hurt his opponent, and if it wasn't for Togekiss picking up 2 kills, Manaphy probably would have been higher on the list and probably could have swept the entire game, to be honest, but it was certainly an interesting game to watch, and I appreciated it only being 12 minutes, yet also incredibly detailed. I very enjoyed his analysis, and that's certainly a game that you should go and watch. But anyway guys, that's Pokemon of the Week for you. All of the coaches' links will be down in the description in case you want to go and check them out, and hopefully mine will too, if you decide that you want to come and watch my content, which isn't uploaded very regularly anymore. But anyway, that's Pokemon of the Week for you, and I hope you've enjoyed this video and you stick around for the coaches' uploads tomorrow. My name has been Wanzy Burnett, and I hope you have a fantastic day and a fantastic week. See you later guys, bye.